Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, let's unpack this. You know that feeling, right? Trying to figure out the perfect recipe for a really good night's sleep.
Oh, yeah. It feels like a puzzle sometimes.
Totally. We hear all the standard advice, cool room, consistent schedule, definitely no screens right before bed.
Right. The usual suspects.
And it's solid advice, sure, but sometimes, even following all the rules, it doesn't quite cut it.
Doesn't always get you there, no.
But what if there was another piece of that puzzle? Something maybe often overlooked. Perhaps even a surprising, maybe simpler hack.
Interesting.
Something suggested by some new research that could actually boost key metrics of your sleep quality.
Okay, I'm listening.
That's the possibility raised by a study we're diving into today, pulling right from the sources you shared.
The Sleep Health Journal study.
Exactly, that new pilot study and also a health news article covering it. So our mission here is to really dig into what the science actually says about this potential link between sexual activity and sleep. What did they measure objectively with devices versus what did people just feel subjectively?
Yeah, that objective versus subjective piece is key.
And why might this connection even exist biologically? We also have to talk about the study's limitations. That's vital context.
Absolutely crucial.
And then we'll try to figure out what this might mean for you listening when you're thinking about your own, sleep strategy.
Right. So the heart of this, as you said, is this new pilot study. It was designed specifically to look at how sexual activity impacts sleep outcomes.
Using both kinds of measures.
Using both, yeah. Direct physiological measurement and people's self-reports.
Okay. And who was in it?
It was a relatively small group, which is typical for a pilot study. 7 healthy heterosexual couples.
So 14 people total.
14 individuals, yeah. All in their mid-20s, living together, and they reported having sex at least twice a week already. So that gives you a baseline.
Got it. And how did they set it up? What did the couples actually do?
Well, it was quite structured. Over 11 nights, these couples experienced 3 different conditions.
Okay.
And they did it in a counterbalanced order so the timing wouldn't mess up the results.
Smart. What were the conditions?
Condition 1, nights with absolutely no sexual activity, just normal bedtime routine.
Okay, they controlled.
Condition 2, nights where participants engaged in solo masturbation ending in orgasm.
Right.
And condition 3, nights where they had partnered sex also ending in orgasm.
Okay, so comparing no activity, solo activity, and partnered activity, all ending in orgasm for the active conditions.
Precisely. And to get the data, they used a 2-pronged approach. For the objective sleep stuff, they used a wireless headband. It's called the Dream M3.
A headband. What does that do?
It's pretty neat tech, actually. It tracks physiological data while you sleep. It has 5 electrodes for electroencephalogram.
Brain activity, right?
Brain activity, exactly. And an accelerometer to track movement.
Makes sense.
And also a pulse oximeter, which measures blood oxygen levels, helps understand breathing.
Wow, okay. So it gets a lot of data.
It does. And they were told to put this headband on after any sexual activity for those conditions. And right before trying to sleep for the no-sex nights. Now, one point to note, and it's a limitation we'll definitely circle back to.
Okay.
For the solo masturbation nights, the person slept in a separate room from their partner.
Oh, interesting. That could definitely be a factor itself.
It could. And then on the subjective side, they just kept daily diaries.
Simple enough. What did they log?
Each morning. Did you have sex last night? How well do you feel you slept? What's your mood like? How ready do you feel for the day?
Okay, so we've got the hard data from the headband and the personal feelings from the diaries. And you said there was a contrast.
A really interesting one, yeah. Let's start with the objective data, what that Dream M3 headband picked up.
All right, what did the tech tell us?
So first off, maybe not surprisingly, people went to bed later on nights they had sex.
Makes sense, yeah.
About 35 minutes later after solo masturbation, on average, and maybe 26 minutes later after partnered sex, compared to the no-sex nights.
Okay, so activity takes time. Understood.
But here's the kicker. Despite going to bed later, the objective data showed they spent significantly less time awake after they initially fell asleep.
Oh, really? Less tossing and turning during the night.
That's what the metric suggests. It's called wake after sleep onset. We can just call it time awake during the night.
Okay, less time awake during the night. How much less?
On average, about 7 minutes less time awake during the night on the sex or masturbation nights compared to the no sex nights.
7 minutes. Doesn't sound like a huge amount, but I guess consistently less awake time is good.
It points towards more consolidated, less fragmented sleep, which is generally considered a positive thing for sleep quality, even if it's a relatively small change in minutes here.
Okay, less fragmented sleep. What else?
Hand in hand with that, they also had significantly higher sleep efficiency.
Sleep efficiency. That's the percentage of time in bed you're actually asleep.
Exactly. After partner sex, the average efficiency was 93.4%. After solo masturbation, 93.2%.
And compared to no sex.
That was 91.5%. So a noticeable jump, even though they might have been in bed slightly less time overall because they started later.
Right.
The time they were in bed was used more effectively for actual sleep.
More efficient sleeping. Interesting. Any other objective findings?
Yeah, one more related to sleep stages. They looked at the lightest stage of sleep called N1.
N1, okay. The stage you're in when you're just drifting off.
Kind of, yeah.
Sure.
It's the least restorative stage. Participants spent more time in N1 after nights with no sex compared to nights with solo masturbation.
So less time in that light N1 stage after solo masturbation, meaning they got into deeper sleep faster, maybe?
That's the implication, yeah. Less time hovering in that very light stage is generally seen as better quality sleep.
Makes sense. Anything else from the headbands?
There was one other finding, more about the couple sleeping together. There are rapid eye movement sleep stages, REM sleep.
Dreaming sleep.
Right, the dreaming and memory consolidation stage. Those stages were more synchronized between partners when they slept together.
More in sync.
Yeah, but interestingly, this happened regardless of whether they had sex or not that night.
Oh, so that might just be about sharing a bed, not the sex itself.
Seems likely, yeah. More of a co-sleeping effect, perhaps.
Okay, so objectively,
Right?
later bedtimes, but then less time awake during the night, higher sleep efficiency, maybe less time in the lightest sleep stage. Pretty clear physiological differences.
Measurable differences, yes.
But now, let's completely switch gears. What did the participants feel? What did those daily diaries say? This is where you said it got weird.
Yeah, this is maybe the most surprising part. Based on their own reports, participants did not notice any significant differences in how well they thought they slept.
Wait, really? Across all three conditions?
Yeah.
No sex, solo, partnered.
Right.
They felt their sleep was basically the same?
Pretty much, yeah. Those objective improvements, the headband was picking up less wake time, better efficiency, they weren't consciously perceiving that as, like, wow, I slept so much better last night.
Whoa. That is fascinating. Their bodies were objectively sleeping better by some metrics, but they didn't actually feel it.
It's a real disconnect, isn't it? It really makes you wonder about how accurately we perceive our own sleep.
Definitely. But was there any subjective difference they reported? Anything at all?
There was one thing related to the next day. Participants reported feeling significantly more motivated and ready for the day ahead.
Okay.
The morning after partnered sex, specifically compared to nights with no sexual activity.
So not necessarily feeling better rested, but more ready to go.
Yeah.
After partnered sex.
Exactly. And they even found a correlation. The reported intensity of the orgasm tended to track with these feelings of readiness and motivation the next day.
So a potential next day mood or energy boost from partnered sex, even if the sleep quality didn't feel different.
That seems to be what the subjective data suggests.
Okay, which brings us to the big question. Why? Why might any of this be happening? What are the biological ideas behind this link?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. The sources really point towards the chemical changes happening in the body after orgasm.
Hormones?
Hormones, primarily. Two get highlighted. The first is oxytocin.
Oxytocin, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it gets released after orgasm. The Health News article called it a natural sedative. It's linked to stress relief, maybe lowering cortisol, stress hormone.
Okay, a natural sedative.
The scientific paper adds a bit more, calling oxytocin the bonding hormone. It notes it's elevated after intercourse, and it's been linked in other studies to higher quality of life, lower cortisol, and improved sleep quality.
So calming, bonding, maybe sleep promoting. What's the other one?
The other is prolactin.
Prolactin. Okay.
Also released after orgasm, and the sources note its release might be even greater after intercourse compared to masturbation.
Interesting. And what does prolactin do?
It's associated with that feeling of relaxation, maybe even satiation after sex. It's also linked to the quality of the orgasm itself and sexual satisfaction.
Okay, so you've got oxytocin acting maybe like a sedative and stress reliever. and prolactin bringing on relaxation.
That's the idea. The hypothesis presented in the sources is that this sort of hormonal cocktail released after orgasm, plus the overall physical relaxation and maybe emotional connection,
Right.
it all combines to create what they call a soporific effect.
Soporific, meaning sleep-inducing.
Yeah, basically induces sleepiness or deep relaxation. And that could be the mechanism behind those objective improvements the headbands picked up, the better efficiency, the less time awake during the night.
That makes biological sense, at least as a theory.
It's the leading theory based on the sources. And, you know, it's worth remembering, like you said, the study used objective data, which is newish.
Right.
But the idea isn't totally new. Previous studies that relied just on diaries, just subjective reports, had already found that people who had partnered sex ending in orgasm reported falling asleep faster and having better sleep quality. Subjectively.
Ah, okay. So people felt it helped in older diary studies.
Yeah, studies in places like the Journal of Sleep Research reported those subjective links.
So the key contribution of this new pilot study is adding that objective layer.
Yeah.
Using the headband tech to show there are actual, measurable physiological changes happening, even if the people in this study didn't consciously feel that sleep boost.
Exactly. It adds that physiological confirmation, showing it's not just a feeling people report. There's something real happening in the body, even if the perception doesn't always match.
It brings a whole new dimension, validating some of those earlier subjective findings with hard data.
It does. The sources also mention, very briefly, an older study back from like 1985. That one did use polysomnography, a more complex sleep measurement tool, but it didn't find sleep differences after masturbation.
Oh, why the difference then?
Well, the authors of this new study suggest possible reasons. The old study was in a lab, which can really mess with sleep.
Right. Sleeping in a lab is weird.
Totally. And their control condition was reading for 15 minutes, which for some people reading is a sleep aid. So maybe not the best comparison.
Gotcha. Different context, different setup. Okay, this is all really intriguing stuff. Objective improvements in sleep structure, even without the feeling of it. Plus, maybe a mood boost the next day after partnered sex, backed by some plausible hormone science.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back to the listener. What does this potentially mean for you as you're trying to figure out your own sleep situation?
Well, I think the main implication here is that this research adds, another potential tool to the toolkit. It suggests that, for some people at least, sexual activity that ends in orgasm could be a behavioral thing, not a pill.
A non-drug approach.
Exactly, a non-pharmacological approach that might actually offer real, objectively measurable improvements in certain sleep metrics, like cutting down that awake time during the night, boosting efficiency.
And the next day readiness thing after partnered sex.
And that too, yeah. A potential subjective boost for the day ahead.
Okay, that sounds potentially quite helpful. BUT,
Yeah.
and you flagged this earlier, it sounds like there's a pretty big but coming. We absolutely need to talk about the limitations.
Oh, absolutely. Essential context. This isn't, definitive proof for everyone.
Right. What are the big caveats?
First and foremost, this is a pilot study.
Meaning small and preliminary.
Exactly. Small, exploratory, designed just to see if there's a signal worth looking into more deeply. Only 14 people total. You just can't draw broad general conclusions from such a small group.
Okay, small sample size, big limitation number one.
Definitely. Limitation number two. The participants were specifically young, healthy sleepers.
Not people with sleep problems.
Right. They didn't have chronic insomnia or other diagnosed sleep disorders, so these findings might not apply at all to older adults or people who actually struggle with sleep, the very people often looking for help.
So you can just tell someone with insomnia, oh, just try this.
Absolutely not based on this study alone. The sample was also limited to heterosexual couples. We have no idea from this data if the findings would be the same for individuals with other sexual orientations or in different relationship structures.
Good point. Heteronormative sample.
And they didn't control for other potentially important things like where women were in their menstrual cycle or people's attachment styles in relationships or just general relationship satisfaction.
All things that could affect both sex and sleep, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
They could influence the results. And then there's that other thing we mentioned.
The separate rooms for solo masturbation.
Exactly. That solo masturbation condition required sleeping separately. It's entirely possible that just sleeping alone versus next to someone influenced the sleep results, completely separate from the masturbation itself. That's a confound.
Yeah, sleeping alone versus together is a big difference for many people.
It really is. And remember, they put the headbands on after the sexual activity.
Right. You mentioned that could be an issue.
The authors themselves noted that activating the device, fiddling with the app, that might have slightly delayed when the sleep measurement officially started.
Meaning they might have missed the very beginning of sleep onset.
Potentially, yeah. If there was a really rapid sleep-inducing effect right after orgasm, the measurement might have started just a bit too late to fully capture it.
So the effect could have been even stronger right away, but the tech couldn't quite catch it. Interesting.
It's a possibility. And then, basic study stuff. Compliance, whether they actually did the activity or not on a given night, was self-reported.
Ah, okay. Trusting people's diaries.
And there's always the chance of self-selection bias. People who volunteer for a study about sex and sleep. They might just be different from the general population in ways that affect the results.
True. And did they look at sex without orgasm?
Good question. The study focused specifically on sexual activity ending in orgasm. It didn't explicitly compare, say, partnered sex with orgasm versus partnered sex without orgasm. So we can't fully isolate the effect of the orgasm itself versus just the intimacy or activity from this data.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of really crucial context.
Yeah.
Small pilot study, young, healthy sleepers, specific demographic, potential confounds like sleeping arrangements, measurement timing issues, self-report.
It's important to keep all that in mind.
Absolutely. So wrapping this all up, where does this deep dive leave you, the listener? It seems like this study gives you some specific research-backed points to maybe consider, like these objective improvements in reducing wake time during the night, boosting overall sleep efficiency, even if you might not feel subjectively like your sleep quality soared.
Right. The body might be getting slightly more consolidated sleep.
Plus that potential subjective mood or readiness boost the next day, specifically linked to partnered sex in this study.
But as we've hammered home, remembering all those limitations is key. This isn't a magic bullet, not a universal guarantee, especially if you deal with persistent sleep problems. But it's certainly, an interesting new piece of data in the very complex world of sleep science.
So quick recap then. This recent pilot study, using those objective headband measures, found that sexual activity ending in orgasm solo, or partnered, was linked to spending less time awake during the night and having higher sleep efficiency.
Objectively measured improvements.
And partnered sex was also linked to feeling more motivated and ready the next day, subjectively.
Right.
But participants in this specific study didn't report actually feeling like their sleep quality was better overall.
That key disconnect. And the crucial limitations: small pilot, young healthy sleepers, specific demographic, potential confounds like the solo sleeping condition.
All of which leaves us with maybe a final thought to chew on. Given that people didn't feel their sleep was better, despite those objective improvements, what does that tell us about how we perceive our own sleep versus what's actually happening physiologically?
That's a fascinating question in sleep research generally. The gap between subjective feeling and objective reality.
And maybe, looking forward, how could research build on this? How could we explore these potential effects, or maybe the lack of effects, in people who actually struggle with sleep? The insomniacs, the older adults.
That's definitely where future research would need to go to see if these findings have broader relevance, especially clinical relevance.
Something for you to ponder anyway, as you navigate your own path to getting a good night's rest.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.